right. Good morning, everybody. Today is Monday, June 6th, 2016. And this is Before the First Cup of Jules here on UCY.TV. Happy Monday, everyone. It is 67 degrees and beautifully sunny here in upstate New York. It is still beautifully fragrant. Not only are my clematis blooming, but my wisteria is blooming as well. I don't think wisteria smell too much, but they are certainly pretty flowers. They grow long and purple, kind of purpley blue. Look them up. But warning, they engulf anything you grow them on. I know it's probably only 10 years I've had this vine. And it started up just as a little stick. And now this thing has completely taken over my fence. It's grown up and over. It's growing out of the lawn. I really need to... Once it's done flowering, I need to go at it with the clippers. All right, where do we leave off on Friday? We titled the show Banana, Potato, Tomato, Lettuce, and Rice Vaccines. Ethics Out a Window. And that's about it. We've spent the last 3 weeks looking at lots of things, but gut bacteria and how different things we put into our body affect that gut bacteria, specifically genetically modified foods, glyphosate on food spray with pesticide, most likely genetically modified foods. We've looked at the tech billionaires and a lot of these tech companies getting into the game, namely, IBM with the shape-shifting immune system. They had one of the three that we had read about. Some of these new experimental universal vaccines. We might actually get into some even more shocking stuff about that I found last night. And good old Billy Gates working with a lot of these different institutions. Of course, sprinkle funding everywhere, here, there, and everywhere. But especially the one that concerned me was at MIT with the synthetic biotics, synthetic gut bacteria that they can program to go in and manipulate and make changes in your body, detect and destroy. How frightening is that at this tiny level, basic bacterial level? We discovered Dr. Mercola did an interview with Dr. Perlmutter, I think his name was. The guy was great. They talked all about probiotics, and and we've kind of covered how the decimation of that gut bacteria, and we found out there are 5 different bacteria in the body, the gut being one of the primaries, that can directly affect your brain, no less. But in the decimation of that gut bacteria, it causes this whole cascade of illness with leaky gut syndrome that, of course, then makes poisons easy to get into the bloodstream by passing that blood barrier, whether it be in the gut or the brain. It's very important that we understand that we can physically be hijacked by just something as simple as our gut bacteria. And then we started looking at them programming foods, right? This is where this edible vaccine thing came in. So, tomato, potato, lettuce, rice, tobacco. That was one now that they're using for the therapeutics. They were pumping out the Ebola vaccine. I don't know if any of you dug into any of the pharmaceutical companies, but I have. I look at a lot of the investment information, because that's where they give a lot of secrets away to try and wow and dazzle the Wall Street darlings to come spend money on them. And a lot of these companies are making these new therapeutics, biologic therapeutics, that are going to be able to manipulate, whether it be your gut bacteria or your T cells for your immune system, or go in and change your DNA. I mean, literally, that was that New York Times story that it talked about it being able to go in and physically change the DNA of the person who got the vaccination. Now, we are going to hope here, I'll tell you, this whole weekend, my internet has been acting very bizarrely And then one of the hosts messaged me and said, "Is your internet acting weird?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Well, our internet's acting just like yours, where it just doesn't go anywhere." So I am hoping that at least one of these stories out of the, I would have to say there's a good 5 tabs open. I would hope at least one of these stories would load. So we might have to do the unhappy elephant here in a minute. Because I had the entire progression for the entire show set up. Get back your microphone. All right, here's one. Oh, poo, poo. All right. Now, we talked about the edible banana vaccine. Charles Artston, he was a scientist back in the 80s and 90s, had started messing around with banana vaccines in the hopes that he would be able to inoculate poor people in third world nations with something as simple as a banana. We saw that there were a lot of other researchers now in the United States as well as Japan. That was the rice guy who was in Japan, the Zukiyuki. And a lot of these places, every story we read, they all got money from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is so awesome. But remember, the tobacco vaccine originally came from DARPA. And then, of course, was over the last few years out of Texas A&M, Philadelphia, somewhere in Philly. They were messing around in Penn State. And one of the tobacco companies to produce antigens for Ebola. So I see now there's a whole bunch of companies. Last night I was digging into all the financials of these 10. I don't know if I left that story open. The 10 companies to watch with their immunotherapies. And they were talking about all the stuff that we talk about on this show. Like, this is ready to cha-ching, cash in because of all these shape-shifting new technologies to fight against universal infection. I'm disturbed. I'm very disturbed. This went from lab to what we're going to people. Went from experimental pie in the sky to what we're going to start doing human trials. When did this happen? And speaking of human trials, where do we always do human trials? Oh, on third world nations. Don't I see, and God, this is like syrup right now. Don't I see that this brand new HIV vaccine, did you see that? That's going to be the first one. They're going to edit it right out of the genome of people that have it. If I can get there. Come on. I'm not going to stress it today. I was a long weekend. I had a lot of work to do. And then it rained all day yesterday, so I painted my bathroom. Like, that's definitely not something to do when you wanted to relax. But once you're painting, actually, it's very relaxing. But yeah, definitely was a big job for just a few hours on a Sunday. All right, hold on. We're going to get there. Oh, I want to wish a big happy birthday to Larry Taylor Phillips. Because Facebook tells me today is your birthday. So happy birthday, Larry. All right, let's get there before the first cup. Wow, I really think Chrome becoming unresponsive just out of the blue, doesn't even click, doesn't even spin upstairs. It's like, oh, you have no internet. What are you thinking? You have internet. That's what Chrome says. Blank page. No internet found, but I could toggle to Firefox and bang, I'm on the internet. So it's pretty amusing that Chrome just decides that it can't detect my internet. Nope. Now it's just going to sit here, but everything worked fine 10 minutes ago. We are in not responding mode. All right, you know what? We're going to go to the other computer, and I'm going to play nasty. Let's see if I can get to Facebook on this machine because I do know where this one story is that I can't quite get to. I'll find it. Oh, You guys need to understand like how frustrating this is in the morning. I am not the most pleasant person to begin with in the morning. So then, and I worked in tech for 25 years. I started out, doing troubleshooting, and oh my God, do I hate troubleshooting. And so, get me on the radio first thing in the morning and give me computer problems. And you would be quite surprised at how pleasant I am right now. That little baseball bat is always dancing in the back of my head. All right, now what the hell was I going to look up for you guys? Now I don't even remember, damn it. And that other machine is still like flashing now back and forth between browser window and Skype and browser window and whatever. Oh, the HIV vaccine. That's what it was. Let's find that. Here it is. So we got all these real-time therapeutics and whatever, being able to DNA manipulate. We got this brand new CRISPR that can not only edit DNA, but edits RNA as well, which makes it even more powerful. Here. New experimental HIV vaccine to be tried where? Oh, South Africa. Yay! Yes, we're going to take it down to South Africa. As millions of people around the world continue to die of AIDS, scientists from the United States are preparing to run large-scale clinical trials of a new HIV vaccine in South Africa. Now, usually it's Africa or India. Now, they're doing a lot of the edible vaccine development and testing in India. They were doing Gardasil there as well. Now, okay. So then everything comes back, and I have some weird page that I never clicked on called PoliceStateDaily.com. The future drug war for breathalyzers. Well, guess what? I wasn't on that page, never been to that page, had nothing to do with any topic I was dealing with, so why is it even open on my computer? That was very odd. And then Facebook is on a page about upcoming events. Well, I never went there either. I don't know, guys. There's definitely some bizarro stuff happening on the internet. Okay. Anyway, so we have this HIV vaccine now. We're going to roll it out experimental in South Africa. The vaccine is an improvement of a previous one, the RV144, and scientists are optimistic that it will yield better results in this trial, which is scheduled to begin in November. The director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, Dr. Anthony Fauci, we've run across him a few times, explains for the first time in 7 years, the scientific community is embarking on a large-scale clinical trial of the HIV vaccine, the product of years of study and experimentation. And, we just read the other day, we're reading about the food vaccines, and then we read about the GMO bananas that Bill and Melinda Gates were also responsible for, that they're going to pay University of Iowa students $900 to eat one vitamin A laden, genetically modified Bill and Melinda Gates banana. Seems highly suspicious to me. Never before tested, never eaten before by humans. And they're going to give them to college students. It's absolute insanity. Some of this other stuff too. Just reading one of these other... might have been upstairs this weekend. I don't know. I was cutting shows and reading all day yesterday before I finally decided to get busy and do something that I could feel accomplished for, like paint a bathroom. But when I was combing through stories, I had seen this other one, and maybe I'll find it later for tomorrow. I was so disturbed that they were literally looking for volunteers. Maybe it's up in Minnesota. One of those upper Midwest heading to the West states up there. They were one of the universities up there, done all this research and development and it was funded by all these, National Institute of Health and whatever agencies on these newfangled vaccines. And they were looking for thousands of people to be part of a multi-year newfangled vaccine study to come, and you'd have to come once a week, and then you get blood tests, and then they check your immune response and whatever, and they're going to give you just a little bit, and they're going to do it like an immunotherapy, kind of like when you get allergy shots. Anyone who ever had those, I had those for years, and it was back in the days before I knew anything about mad science, but still seemed pretty straightforward the way they used to do that, right? They would put whatever you were allergic to into the vaccine, and they would start it at very low doses, and you'd start at frequencies that were close together. So I would go once a week, and every week they would jack it up another cc of whatever the allergic substance was, and then we went to every 2 weeks, and we again started then lower, and we jack it up. And then we went to 4 weeks, and I actually got to 6 weeks, I believe, between my injections for dust. I was very allergic to dust for a long time. That's why I had to take the Benadryl every day, which now they're saying, yes, Benadryl causes dementia, as well as Tylenol PM and a bunch of other things, if you take it every day. But yeah, after 6 years of, or maybe it was even 10 years, and it was 6 weeks between, of dust allergy shots. I, knock on wood, it still bothers me a little bit. My nose gets itchy, but I don't have the horrible issues that I had before. It was probably 20 years ago or so. So, old school immunotherapy, absolutely. My immune system works just fine. But I definitely don't want any of the shape-shifting crap. So anyway, Dr. Fauci hopes that this new HIV vaccine will be safe and effective in order to bring the end to the AIDS epidemic, which devastated the world, particularly the developing world. He further says that the decision to carry out the new trial in South Africa was based on the fact that that country has the highest HIV prevalence in the world, and the human immunodeficiency virus epidemic is widely believed to have originated. Oh no, are they going to tell us exactly where? In the Democratic Republic of Congo in the 1970s. A virus known to cause a condition referred to as acquired immune deficiency syndrome, whose cure is yet to be found. While the Chinese trying to make embryos in a lab that are impervious to getting HIV. We read about that story. I don't know. I have a lot of reservation about HIV that it ever even came from the wild, first of all. And second of all, then with all their treatments, I've heard and read so many different things about the AZT medications and that the antivirals that they were giving them were actually causing them to get sick. And there was something in one of the interviews that I heard. One of the drugs they were giving AIDS patients was actually chemotherapy medication, and it was causing them to get sick. So I don't know. I would say stick with staying healthy, get your gut bacteria up, exercise a lot. For any of these infections, I mean, you know how to keep your body and to keep your immune system in check. I know somebody personally who has this infection, and it has been about 12 or 15 years now, and they just take care of themselves, and they are absolutely fine and never had to go on any medication. Anyway, so yes, experimental vaccine, surprise, surprise, to be tried in South Africa and in Europe. Just like they approved the 3-parent IVF, and then they approved being able to genetically modify embryos, of course, in a petri dish, nowhere else. Well, now the first gene therapy for children has just been approved in Europe as well. In a landmark moment for the scientific research, the world's first gene therapy treatment for children has been given the green light by European Commission. It is called Strimvelis, and it treats several severe combined immunodeficiency, ADA, SCID, which I'm not really sure what that is, a very rare disorder that can be fatal in a very short space of time for those affected. The disease leaves newborns with almost no defense against viruses and bacteria and is closely linked to X-linked SCID, or the bubble boy disease. Of course, we all learned about that from Seinfeld. Bubble boy. It's not funny, really, if you had a kid, but I do remember that George was so annoyed with Bubble Boy, because the young patient in the U.S. who had this lived inside of a protective plastic shield. That's why they came with the name Bubble Boy. What makes the new treatment special is that for the very first time, a commercial treatment has used genetic repair techniques to cure the disorder. Thanks to success in clinical trials, it is now approved for marketing within Europe. Now, guys, whoa, back up the truck. So you're doing genetic repair. I'd really be interested, like, how they're doing this. Are they doing all the slicing and dicing like we've been reading about? Do they, like, CRISPR some stuff and then inject it in? And then it replicates after it gets into the cells. How are they doing this? And even if you were desperate as a parent, your child were living in a bubble, would you sacrifice potentially that child to have something never before really done ever to, like, their base genetic code so they could potentially be normal? God, that's like, how could a parent do that to their kid? I mean, I guess if the kid were just, like, so sick, and again, this is something that is a genetic disorder at birth, so I guess if the kid doesn't have much chance of a life, you might be convinced to do it. But God, how could they do this? This faulty gene is inherited by both parents. Caused by a gene inherited from both parents and affects around 15 patients a year in Europe. So, of course, they picked a very strategic genetic disorder where they'll get a good sample size, but it's not huge enough to be able to make this economically viable, which then makes you question. But see, it's the technology. It's not the disease. Once they can fix one, then they're going to be like, oh, well, look, there's 10 others that work exactly like this that we'll be able to manipulate. And yes, here we go. The disease is often fatal before a child's first birthday. So again, the desperate, they prey upon the desperate. The disease is currently treated using a bone marrow transplant or a lifelong and very expensive enzyme replacement therapy. In the case of Stremvellus, stem cells are removed from a patient's bone marrow, corrected in a test tube to replace the faulty gene, and then reintroduced into the body. If you want to fix a disease for life, you need to put the gene into the stem cells, says pediatrician Maria Gazia Roncarlo from Stanford University to MIT Technology Review. And this is the start of a very new chapter in the treatment of rare genetic diseases. And we're hoping that this therapeutic approach could also be used to help patients with other rare diseases in the future, says Martin Andrews, the head of the rare disease unit at GlaxoSmithKline, the company behind the treatment. You know, so we're going to have these shape-shifting immune systems that will be these universal vaccines that they'll give us that go in and change our DNA. And they were saying in the New York Times article, it's more like gene therapy as opposed to a vaccination. But then we're going to have, on a disease-by-disease basis, a way to go in and correct the defective genes. I don't know about you guys, but I like being a defective human. I really don't need to be perfect. And I got to tell you, you want to talk about hubris? We're going to talk about Harvard and that secret meeting that they had with those 150 scientists a few weeks ago discussing whether or not they should produce a synthetic human genome. Well, 3 weeks go by and bang, yeah, they decided they're going to create a synthetic human genome. And not only that, something that really struck me, right? We got all these tech companies and rich tech billionaires and good old Bill and Melinda Gates all lurking around in the background, responsible for a lot of this research and funding that's going on. Not all of it, but they're all a part of it. And so I'm reading about this synthetic human genome project, and I see that the first round of funding was presented by a company called Autodesk. I was like, what? Autodesk? I've used them. Autodesk makes AutoCAD. You know, AutoCAD for doing like engineering diagrams? Yes, I used to use it every single day. Autodesk? Yes, Autodesk gave the first round of funding, I think it was 225,000, maybe million. I don't know. We'll have to see when we get to the story. It was a good chunk of change to start developing the synthetic human genome. Are you kidding me? So what? Autodesk decided that maybe they needed to get into this new tech company becomes biotech company field because their stock price was losing money, and they just tossed a chunk of change at some transhumanist that wants to sequence the entire human genome and then make it synthetic. It's just very bizarro to me. We just have like random tech companies. And even the one woman in the story calls Autodesk rinky dink because they are. They made AutoCAD. And not that AutoCAD was rinky dink because millions of engineers use it around the world, but like that was their one claim to fame. It's not like they have every desktop or every search engine or, you know what I mean? Or Big Blue like IBM, Google, and Microsoft. All right, anyway, it says gene therapy techniques are still so new that scientists and regulators are wary of introducing them too soon. Well, in this country, think of that 21st century Cures Act hopping through the House. There won't be any regulation anymore. It says this method of treatment has the potential to be hugely beneficial for medical science, but essentially playing with the most fundamental building blocks of life. Swapping out genetic code is a lot more complicated than replacing the parts in a car engine, though the principle is the same. Yes, let's just put a new tranny in. Of the 18 children that were treated with that Strimvelis, which is the genetic modification of the stem cells in the bone marrow that were taken outside, done in a test tube, and then injected back in, researchers actually found a 100% survival rate based on follow-up durations of up to from between 2.3 to 13.4 years, which suggests that Strimvelis can indeed replace faulty genes with working copies without any adverse side effects, something that cannot be said for existing treatments. And I would say, you know, stem cells, we've talked about that before, out of all the mad science technologies that we've talked about, I would have to say, at least for what I would feel safest with if I were faced with some life-threatening disease and needed to depend on 21st century medicine to live beyond the years ahead, I would say stem cell is probably the most promising and probably the least scary. And maybe it was because they've been talking about and experimenting with stem cell since the 80s, since Ronald Reagan, and maybe even before. But, you know, that was where the whole debate came about whether or not they were using aborted fetal tissue. And now we found out they don't have to anymore. They can just coax some stem cells off of your hand, turning them into the purulent that then can be turned into any type of stem cell in the body. You got lung issues, they can inject them in the lung. You got heart issues, right into the heart. Oh, you're clinically brain dead. Well, they're experimenting right now about whether or not they can bring you back from being literally clinically dead by injecting stem cells for the brain into the brains of clinically dead patients. It's quite an amazing therapy. And I mean, the fact that now this bubble boy disease, 100% survival rate. after they have taken out the bone marrow stem cells. So those are like original stem cells. They didn't even coax those. And then injected them back in. That's pretty damn good. I saw another one too. Researchers convert cirrhosis causing cells into healthy liver cells in mice. Advances in stem cell research have made it possible to convert patients' skin cells into heart cells, kidney cells, liver cells, like I was just saying, and more in the brain cells as well. Remember, mini brain balls. Giving researchers hope that one day such cells could replace organ transplantation for patients with organ failure. But successfully grafting these cells into patients' failing organs remains a clinical challenge. Now, a team of researchers led by UC San Francisco scientists has demonstrated in mice that it is possible to generate healthy new liver cells within the organ itself, making engraftment unnecessary. And I thought the liver was one of those organs that actually can regenerate itself. Turmeric will definitely help if you have some sort of liver disease or liver failure. Start pounding some high potency turmeric. I've read probably 100 studies on the benefits of turmeric and all the different things it can do in the body. And liver regeneration is one that it helps a lot with. My sister had a personal friend, and I mean, this was probably 20 years ago, too. I had heard about this whole thing happening. I knew her friend, but he had some major issues and was in stage 4 liver failure. And the doctors basically told him, you need a liver transplant. There's nothing we can do for you except that you're a drinker. So guess what, Mr. Drinker? We can't get you a new liver. And so he had some friends in India. And his Indian friends said, come on down. We're going to take care of you. And he went there for like 6 months. And they put him on this intensive turmeric therapy. And he came back here about 6 months later. And the doctors were completely bamboozled because you couldn't tell that he had had any type of liver disease just 6 months before. And I mean, that was from a personal friend of my sister's who I'd met multiple times before. And he is still alive and kicking and doing cocktails. So, he's no longer in stage 4 liver failure. And he absolutely 100% attributes the turmeric to fixing his very sick liver. So I don't know, do your research, but I'm telling you, there are things out there that definitely can rejuvenate. But now they've found that they can use stem cells as well without even having to graft anything. Says what's more, they did this by converting the very cells that drive liver disease, so they managed to even take the cirrhosis cells and turn them into functioning liver cells. So it got rid of the damage and got the liver kicked back into action. Now that's pretty incredible. They were able to take the disease cells and flip that switch to turn them back into healthy cells. The technique takes advantage of a viral gene delivery technology. Ding, ding. We've talked about that a million times. That's how they also do genetically modified vegetables and plants as well. Is they use, and fish and whatever, they use that viral gene, right? They use the Trojan horse. I don't know if it's a biological viral gene or if it's a virus-like particle we found that they're using in the Gardasil vaccine that fakes the body into thinking it's a virus. But what they do is they scan the cells and they look for the cracks, and then they sneak into the cell and release their payload. And as that payload replicates, that's how they change the properties of the cell. So the technique takes advantage of a viral gene delivery technology that's gone through the early validation in patients for liver-detected gene therapies, suggesting it could be readily translated into therapy for patients with liver disease. Part of why this works is that, and this is what I said, the liver itself is a naturally regenerative organ, so it can deal with new cells very well. And what we see is that the converted cells are not only functionally integrated into the liver tissue, but they also divide and expand, leading to patches of the new liver. They're not only functional, but are integrated, and they divide and expand. More than 600,000 patients in the United States suffer from end-stage liver disease or cirrhosis. Another thing, too, here's another issue with the liver. This fatty liver disease, I would guarantee you that probably 50 to 75% of us, if we went and had an ultrasound of our liver done, your doctor would come back and tell you had fatty liver disease. And when I was pregnant, went through all that hell and spent 9 days in intensive care having my daughter, I was very sick for the whole 9 months. My body just was not having it. And I had every scan in the book. And one of the things that they did was they scanned my liver and they told me I had fatty liver disease. I was like, are you kidding me? I wasn't even heavy. Well, I was pregnant, but not being pregnant, I wasn't. I spent most of my adult life from 14 being just slightly over 100 pounds, maybe 110. But it's not like I was heavy. And I found out that fatty liver disease, now it can be cured, by the way. Turmeric can help that. But fatty liver disease can be caused by not only alcohol, but also high fructose corn syrup, which of course is in 99% of all the processed foods out there. So be very careful, because just because you're not eating mountains of saturated fat does not mean that you can't get fatty liver disease. And the only cure from end stage liver disease currently is a liver transplant, like I told you about my sister's friend. But the shortage of donor livers mean that only 6,000 patients benefit from this therapy each year, and 35,000 patients die. And remember, I told you too, if you're a drinker, they won't give you a liver transplant, even if you can get your hands on one. The new approach specifically targets liver fibrosis, a progressive scarring of the liver that is a primary driver of liver disease. Fibrosis develops when liver cells called hepatocytes can't regenerate fast enough to keep up with the damage caused by toxins such as alcohol, or hepatitis C, or fatty liver disease. Cells called myofibroblasts fill in the gaps left by the dying hepatocytes with scar tissue, and it's a bit like patching a flat tire. At first, the patches help maintain the liver's structural integrity, but eventually a liver is more patches than it is functional tissue, and it starts to fail. And, one of the other things I was going to tell you is what sent me over the edge is that I had that maternal high blood pressure that I never had high blood pressure until about 2 months into the pregnancy, and then it was going haywire, up, down, up, down, up, down. And they sent me to the emergency room a few times because it was just so incredibly high. And there's one medication out there, and I don't remember what it was called, but it's been used for like 40 years. They've shown that it's safe for pregnant mothers, which, I know a lot more now than I did then. But at least it didn't cause birth defects, I guess, was the point of the matter, or at least anything that was apparent. And it was the one and only high blood pressure drug that they could give pregnant women. But the problem was they don't give it much anymore to anyone besides pregnant women with serious issues, because it totally takes out your liver. So by the time I was done with this pregnancy, I was in liver failure. Guys, I'm not in liver failure anymore. I did lots of my own treatments with dandelion and turmeric. And there were a few other things. I don't know. I did a lot of different therapeutics on this end, but I'm fine. Knock on wood. I don't have issues with my liver anymore. For a long time I did. You couldn't drink even one drop of alcohol. It felt like someone was stabbing you. It was horrible. But I definitely feel much better, and I do attribute that to liver regeneration and taking care of myself. All right, anyway, I don't want to spend the rest of the show on this. I want to get over to these lunatics at Harvard talking about 3 weeks ago that they were going to create the synthetic human genome. And now, bang! Oh, guess what? We're going to do it. We don't give a shit. There are no ethics. Let's do it anyway. It says, after a secret meeting, scientists announced that they are making a synthetic human genome. Oh! An international group of scientists has just announced their plan to create a synthetic human genome within the next 10 years, which means that they are going to try to write a brand new DNA code for human life from scratch. This ambitious undertaking, called the Human Genome Project Right, could be the key to understanding human disease better than ever before, and it could also greatly reduce the cost of genetic sequencing. It's an incredibly exciting project for science, but what is worrisome is the fact that the project has been launched without the public being properly consulted on any ethical concerns. And that was my big issue with all this. I mean, I have a big issue with synthetic human genome, number one. But number two, this is something that's going to affect all of biology forever and ever in the future on planet Earth. Shouldn't we all have a say? You would think, right? Shouldn't we at least have a vote? Shouldn't we at least be able to submit a comment globally over a 1-year period to let them know what we think? I don't know. I know they don't consult with us for anything, but we're talking about the human genome. We're talking about the building blocks for every human on planet Earth, which means that, at least in my book, that we should all have a say. This is going to pollute the genome. It's just like letting GMOs go, guys. They let the genie out of the bottle. Now you can't stuff it back in. Once they start getting synthetic DNA out there and some of those shape-shifting vaccines, it's exactly what's going to be in it. And now synthetic human genomes, there's no putting that genie back either. And I think that we're already polluted with some of the stuff we discovered in that Gardasil vaccine. They had virus-like synthetic virus particles, okay? So it's already been happening. It says rumors about this new project started last month when 150 scientists met in a closed-door meeting at Harvard to talk about building an entirely new synthetic human genome. And the fact that journalists were not allowed to be at this meeting was met with criticism. And now 25 of the researchers have outlined their proposal in Science magazine, although it hasn't done much to relieve concerns. And no, because then I have another story here about the guy who's actually responsible for launching this project with the funding of Autodesk. And wait till you hear about this dude. I'm very disturbed, and so is MIT Technology Review. Now let's find this. Hold on. It was MIT. I think it was this one. MIT. Yeah, here we go. I just got to scroll. Let's scroll. All right. MIT Technology Review. Plan to fabricate a genome raises questions on designer humans. What will scientists do with $100 million to mass produce genes in a lab? Well, a proposal by a group of scientists and business people to synthesize a human genome from scratch is attracting sharp criticism for dodging the big ethical questions that such a step raises. And this proposal, described today in a 2.5-page letter being published in Science, is to string together synthetically made DNA and shape it from a human genome able to power a cell in a dish, according to the lead author. A different team has previously made bacteria with lab-made genes, but the human genome is far larger. The backers of this new plan, called HGP Right, argue that a mega project could cause the cost of fabricating DNA to actually plummet 1,000-fold in the next 10 years, prompting a revolutionary advance in science and industry. But the paper's 25 authors remain silent on the looming ethical debate, Will we be able to make people with artificial genomes? And if so, should we? Before launching into such a momentous project, questions need to be asked, including whether or not it should even occur, says Stanford University synthetic biologist Drew Endy. The authors fail to pose these essential questions, and in fact, in their proposal, they fail to pose any questions. Yes, lunatics running the asylum is what's happening. It's not about, right? We saw that CEO of that one company that Jennifer, or Elizabeth, that was Jennifer Dowd, Elizabeth something of that one BioViva, I think was the name of the company, you know, the longevity gene therapy. All they're doing is running ahead, looking at the dangling carrot and the profit, because she, without even having any approvals or anything, she injected herself. We had that Russian scientist injecting himself with 4.5 million year old bacteria, saying it's going to make him, you know, live years longer. Talk about lunatics. These people do not have any concern for ethics or for the long-term damage that this could do to our progeny as humans. They just want to get that Nobel Peace Prize, to be the first ones to get an IPO for a company that's going to make bazillions of dollars. That's all they're thinking about. Luckily, George Church, and he's the one that's responsible for this project, an ebullient futurist whose handiwork is visible in the paper, previously not only asked the big questions, but he answered them as well in his 2012 book called Regenesis: How Synthetic Biology Will Reinvent Nature and Ourselves. Church describes the quote-unquote climax of synthetic biology as the production of humans with lab-fabricated genomes that are immune to what? Oh, ding, ding, all viruses, including HIV and herpes. How interesting that we have these shape-shifting artificial immune systems that they're fooling around with now. 3 or 4 different companies we've read using synthetic DNA. And they're expanding this now. They're going to be universal vaccines that'll protect us against anything because, you know, we're all dying at such a huge rate from these nasty viruses everywhere. They're already starting with this new experimental vaccine that they're launching in South Africa to cure HIV this week. I haven't seen one yet for herpes, but that's another DNA virus, herpes and HIV. I would expect chickenpox, too, to be coming soon. Anyway, this George Church is a colorful and influential figure whose students dominate wide sectors of genomic technology and innovation. This guy is a self-professed transhumanist as well. He also hasn't been shy about coming out in favor of genetically engineered people, including the use of gene editing to repair particular genes before birth. So doing it in a petri dish. We saw in England, they just approved being able to genetically modify children with rare diseases. The bubble boy disease, the very first one. But manufacturing entire human genomes opens a door to larger and different types of alterations. The one that Church has been most enthusiastic about is called recoding, in which any letters of the genomes are widely rejiggered to deny virus entry, and we propose to change it, wrote Church of the Code of All Life. Yes, this sounds like hubris, all right, he says. Ho, ho, ho. The creators of this new technology, this new project called HGP Right, says that their goal is to raise $100 million towards synthesizing a human genome inside of the next 10 years. But, of course, we're only going to do it in a petri dish, they say. You think so? You think that's where it's going to stay? Once they create the 1.6 3 billion. 3 billion DNA sequences required for a human genome in the petri dish. You think that that's just going to stay in the lab? Especially when the guy that's in charge here, this George Church, has written a book called Regenesis, How Synthetic Biology Will Reinvent Nature and Ourselves. I don't think so. But in this story, he promises like 3 times, oh, yes, it's just in the petri dish. And wait, here it comes. This is where the first round of funding has come from. The purpose of this project is to develop and test large genomes themselves. And that is where it stops, says Nancy Kelly, a fundraiser who is among the authors of the paper and is described as a lead executive for the project. The effort so far has included 2 planning meetings and has been paid for with a $250,000 grant from where? Oh, the little rinky-dink software company called Autodesk. And they gave it to an organization called the Center of Excellence for Engineering Biology, which this Nancy Kelly happens to run. They did make it clear that they are going to do this on mammalian cells in the culture, says Peter Carr, a synthetic biologist at Lincoln Labs, who attended the planning meeting, that secret planning meeting about creating the human genome at Harvard last month. But then he says, where does the story go from there? Obviously, part of the excitement is that there would be humans with synthetic genomes. But in the background of all of this exciting dream, what if we could make humans that are immune to viruses? Ding, 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 ding. Now, I believe that this is so closely tied with this new shape-shifting synthetic universal vaccine that we read about last week, that was talked about in the New York Times, that literally goes in and rewrites the person's DNA with this synthetic immune system. And that's what they're talking about. They want to make humans, after they code the full human genome synthetically, humans that can be immune to all viruses. I think that shape-shifting vaccine is the next click into place puzzle piece. Learn how to make that work first. Then you can engineer that right into the human genome. What is strange to critics is that the science paper doesn't mention these possibilities at all, engineering humans. It talks in detail about how cells could be made virus or cancer resistant or have improved traits. But who wants human cells like that, he says. In Church's book, he says the exact same thing about how to make people. And in an email, Church agrees that the proposals described in his book could follow if genome writing technology were developed, even if they aren't the aim of this new project. Our project is paying close attention to these longer-term implications, he said. So even though the official on the books story for this human synthetic genome project is that we're only doing it in a petri dish, it'll never happen out in the outside world, don't worry about it. The guy who's in charge of this entire project has written books about creating synthetic humans and doing all this crazy stuff. And he's like, well, even though we didn't talk about it in any of the research or put it out there, it's still a possibility. Well, of course it is. What do you think's going to happen if they create a full human genome? That they're just going to file it away somewhere in a refrigerator? I don't think so. Says anyway, such unspoken possibilities about creating synthetic humans are troubling to Lori Zoloff, a professor of religion and bioethics at Northwestern University. She says it is unclear if they understand that the first step, which has to be the beginning of the project, is to ask, is this a good idea? Says Zoloff. You'd think so, right? She notes that by making new genomes via sex is one of the last things that people on planet Earth do by themselves with joy and faith, and they don't do it for profit. Once they start doing it in the lab, It has now become a commodity. And I've said that so many times. Like, what is the value of life anymore? Now that we're just splicing and dicing them, and everybody's racing for a cure for something to be able to get their Nobel Prize. We got tech billionaires dumping bazillions of dollars into being able to live forever and cure death as a disease. Where's the value of life anymore? Because there isn't. And once you can create a human in a petri dish and mix and match any traits you want with the push of a button for a price, right? Johnny, you want wings? All right, that's another $150,000. Bloop. There's the wing gene. This is absolute, complete insanity. Zoloff, this professor, also worries that such a monumental proposal is being led by Autodesk. And that's what I said. Autodesk, the company that makes AutoCAD. Why are they involved in this? A mid-cap software company with a rinky-dink biomedical credential. And yeah, they make network design software. Also, Autodesk published 2 Medium posts in which it dismisses the idea of lab-made people. Quote, sorry to disappoint you, but no synthetic humans will be produced here, writes Autodesk futurist Andrew Hessel. According to Mr. George Church, the guy in charge of this program, however, making new types of people is actually the ultimate goal of such a technology. Church is a transhumanist who sees mankind's goal as the further evolving of itself and the rest of nature with it, according to scientific principles. And Church says in his book that these ideas are not as blasphemous as they appear. All right, we're going to have to continue with this horror novel tomorrow. If you can even believe it, that was a fast hour for a Monday. Make sure you stick around. Ms. Lonnie Clark is live up next with a guest. And it's Monday, so there's all kinds of great new radio that's caught for you today. Brand new Brandon Turville tonight at 10 p.m. at Antimedia with Nick and DB at 11 Eastern. Guys,